senses that there is going to be more terrorism, and that's what Bush wants. The internationalists got to have terrorism because it's the only way you get the American people to beg for martial law and to give up their rights. So we know more terrorism is coming. I'm a retired police officer, and we talk to police and soldiers all the time, and they all know this. There will be more terrorism. And of course, then we give up our rights, and we're going to be under martial law. So we need to. These people feel they got an urgency to get their places built, and before the terrorism starts again, and people start demanding that we're going to have roadblocks all across America, and we'll be having to check papers to see if you're allowed to go or who you are and so forth. They want to get up here.
Is this state-sponsored terrorism?
State-sponsored terrorism, just like the others were, just like the World Trade Center bombing 1 and 2. Your listeners probably, and the people you know this, but the average American has no idea how much evidence there is, in fact, to back up the statements that Oklahoma City, the first World Trade Center bombing, second World Trade Center bombing, were all orchestrated, and our government knew about it. And in some cases, like the first World Trade Center, they furnished the explosives and the training for these guys. And so it's all orchestrated, and it's going to be more terrorism because the easiest way to get the American people to not just beg for martial law, but demand it of their official. When they're scared enough, they'll give up everything to be made safe.
Are we looking at the Nazization of the nation?
That's what we are. Yeah, it's not a socialist system as much as a fascist system that's being carried through by our Republican socialists and democratic socialists, or fascists if you want to say. But it is a fascist system. 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 It is a fascist system.
Well, I believe that the Bush administration had an integral role in planning 9/11 for the purpose of giving themselves the terrorist tool to intimidate the entire country into supporting a war against Iraq, to intimidate the Congress into handing over powers to George Bush. They used it like a fine tool to get what they wanted. It was an amazing thing that they've pulled off, and they've managed to, they're the terrorists. The Bush administration are the international terrorists of the world.
George Bush wants to dominate the world. Adolf Hitler wanted to dominate the world. George Bush, though, inherited a very powerful country, and Adolf Hitler built one.
Bush only has one concentration camp, in Guantanamo Bay. Hitler, I think, had about 42, mostly in Poland. there are an awful lot of comparisons of persecution. The attack on Czechoslovakia and other countries that Hitler took over as a perhaps not preemptory strike, but at least in the name of expanding the Third Reich, which is exactly what Bush is trying to do here. The arrogance of this Bush and Hitler is one of the closest comparisons I can possibly make. I was born in Germany. I went through the Nazi period until 14 days before the war broke out, and there are things going on in this country which make me feel just as uncomfortable as I did then.
What I see is that when Hitler, and I lived through that, Hitler was marching in country after country all over Europe, and we're beginning to do that the earth over. And so I think there's a great similarity there. Plus, I think everything that Hitler did was legal in his country, and I think that Bush is really tearing the Constitution apart.
They're celebrating here in San Francisco. Behind me, you'll see the people cheering. There's not a lot to cheer about because war is on the way, regardless of what they say or what we do. This is intentional. This war was planned by Bush and the boys from the Brotherhood of Death. Blair, Bush, they're guilty of sin, guilty of murder in the first degree.
Bush is creating a police state. If you see what it's doing with Operation Tibbs, Homeland Security.
The way that Bush right now is using the terror attacks to scare people, how the September 11th attacks were similar to the Reichstag fire. The Reichstag fire was used to scare people and to scare the political opposition, and Bush basically used 9/11 in the same manner.
These people here are concerned about their civil rights, about their liberties being invaded, not by Saddam Hussein, but by Osama bin Bush.
I do believe absolutely that agents of this government were behind the September 11th attacks, and that they planned the attacks many years in advance, and they used the attacks as pretext for going into war in Afghanistan and leading people into the war in Iraq right now and taking civil liberties away from the American citizens.
I'm Carol Brouillet. I'm a hyperactivist. I'm with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I'm also a soccer mom and a scout leader. And after 9/11, I did some research and I got very disturbed by the evidence that I saw that led me to believe that it was a special operation conducted by the CIA and the Bush administration. And so we led a delegation of human rights and peace groups to our senators demanding a congressional inquiry of 9/11. And shortly thereafter, Bush and Cheney asked Daschle to limit the investigations. They didn't look at all the questions that we raised, which looked at the links between the Bushes and the Bin Laden and the Carlyle groups, the oil interest in Central Asia, and the military stand down of the planes.
The case here, you have the attack on this military significance for purposes of making a coup from the outside. The attack on the Pentagon had no military significance except for the purpose of making a coup from the inside. If you look at the operation, the way it was run, the operation was a fairly sophisticated operation. It probably required a year to a year and a half planning to execute, with no purpose except to terrify the U.S. population and to have an effect upon the world at large. It's an inside job.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
It's an inside job.
It is time for us all to dig deeper, because this could be an inside job.
Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed, 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
It's an inside job.
smartest thing to do is pull it.
It's an inside job. Inside job.
8 hours after the first plane crash, a third building at the World Trade Center collapses. This one, the number 7 World Trade Center building.
This is a look at the flying debris from the number 7 tower. You're going to see that almost coming down the street toward the camera. Number 7 tower at the World Trade Center.
The CIA would have been in there normally, but they had, of course, abandoned the building when the event of catastrophe occurred. The CIA would have been in there normally, but they had, of course, abandoned the building.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
What you're about to see is a number of buildings that have been brought down by explosives that were strategically placed within the structures so that they would come in down on themselves. This is called implosions.
And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Demolition teams talk about it as pulling a building.
The taping that we were doing, there was an explosion. It was way up where the fire was, and the whole building at that point bellied out in flames, and everybody ran.
Made it outside. We made it about a block. We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out. It was if they had detonated. Detonated. Planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom. All the way down. I was watching it and running. Just ran up west. And then you just sort of this cloud of shit chasing you down. Couldn't outrun it. West Street. I couldn't outrun it. So what'd you do? I jumped behind a battalion car. I hit under the car. I was waiting to die.
Thousands of innocent people. Secretaries, office workers, hard-working young men and women who were simply out to build a better world, were sacrificed on the altar of the New World Order on September 11th, 2001.
The building was designed to have a fully loaded 707 crash into it. That was the largest plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door, this intense grid, and the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing to the screen netting.
You're not supposed to question authority in a Orwellian police state. You're supposed to blindly believe what the FBI and the CIA and the State Department and the President tell you is the truth, and nothing else.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was, but I wanted to get his confirmation.
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
And tragically, the only member who got close was Jack Brooks, and he was stopped by the chairman. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, you do have those standby provisions, and the plans are there, and the statutory emergency plans are there, whereby you could in the name of stopping terrorism, apprehend, invoke the military, and arrest Americans and hold them in detention camps.
I'm concerned about the Constitution of the United States of America, that it's being filtered and changed in ways the American public, the citizens of this beautiful country, don't even know.
You're supposed to be too damn dumb and too dense to figure the scam out. You're supposed to buy whatever the White House spin doctors sell you and whatever the managed media tells you.
The CIA would have been in there normally, but they had, of course, abandoned the building.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
The CIA would have been in there normally, but they had, of course, abandoned the building.
It's an inside job. It's an inside.
Obviously, 911 was an inside job. Whoever controlled the electronic security system of the World Trade Center complex had both the power and the opportunity to either prevent or carry out the implosions of the Twin Towers and Building Number 7.
We will discover everything that we possibly can that occurred, and we're going to leave no stone unturned.
Kissinger said that could include a probe of possible involvement by Saudi Arabia, a nation Mr. Bush has praised as a strong ally in the war on terror.
We will follow the facts where they lead.
Were Arabs involved? As a matter of fact, the Kuwait American Company, which underwrote Securicom, the outfit which supplied electronic security for the World Trade Center complex, had ironclad links to the Bush family. We discovered that Marvin P. Bush, the president's youngest brother, was a key member of the board of directors of Securicom between 1994 and the millennium. Was this an inside job? Securicom changed its name in the year 2000 to Stratesec. The key man at Stratesec, President Bush's cousin, Wirt Walker III, the CEO of Kuwait America. Stratesec did the electronic security job on the Twin Towers and Building 7 on 9/11. Was this an inside job?
Larry Silverstein became landlord on July 24th, less than 2 months before the attack. He then had control of the maintenance and security departments, and he began to replace security personnel. After the towers disintegrated, Silverstein demanded insurance companies pay him twice what the policy stated on the grounds that each tower was a separate attack.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
Tom Cheney, rescue worker with the National Urban Search and Rescue. It's part of FEMA.
To be honest with you, we arrived on late Monday night and went into action on Tuesday morning. And not until today did we get a full opportunity to work the entire site other than the spot at Church and Day to which we were deployed. But to be honest with you, we arrived on late Monday night and went into action on Tuesday morning. But to be honest with you, we arrived on late Monday night and went into action on Tuesday morning.
The Chief of Safety of the Fire Department of New York City told me he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
45 minutes into the taping that we were doing, there was an explosion. It was way up where the fire was, and the whole building at that point bellied out in flames, and everybody ran.
I was about 5 blocks away when I heard explosions, 3 thuds, and turned around to see the building we just got out of, antenna tip over and fall in on itself.
And then all of a sudden it started like it sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden 3 big explosions.
When you figure this thing out, you'll realize that the men who committed this atrocity in New York on September 11th, 2001, mass murdered more people than the combined killings of every serial killer in the 228-year history of the United States. That means that they mass murdered more people than John Wayne Gacy, Charles Miles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, the son of Sam, the Midnight Stalker, and Jack the Ripper combined.
Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people, then I would have felt better. Then when I felt like I really offered society something.
These men have the minds of monsters.
I represent Ellen Mariani, wife of Louis Neal Mariani, who died when United Airlines Flight 175 was flown into the South Tower of the World Trade Center on 9/11/2001, the day that will forever change history in the United States. I have filed an amended complaint, and I can explain that later, but I filed that in the United States District Court from the Eastern District of Pennsylvania on November 26, 2003, in the case of Mariani versus Bush, alleging President Bush and officials, including but not limited to Cheney, Ashcroft, Rumsfeld, Feinberg, and Senior Bush, that they had knowledge and warnings of 9/11 and failed to warn or take steps to prevent what occurred on 9/11. That since then they have been covering up the truth of 9/11, and therefore they have violated the laws of the United States of America, and we are suing them under the civil RICO statutes, which were originally brought about to go after mobs in this country. Well, we have a mob, and it's occupying the White House.
I met an ex-CIA agent right after the attack on the World Trade Center, and he told me that he received information in March of 2001 regarding the exact time and place of the attack. So, I feel that it was a setup. 9/11 is the greatest lie ever sold.
This proves an awful lot. It proves that they've obviously planned it and planned it with thought and great detail.
Some sort of insinuation.
Behind that tower on the other side of the hill lies the Hollywood Bowl. They're having a concert there tonight. Hundreds of thousands of people come here to Tinseltown from all over the world, expecting to be entertained. They come to enjoy life here, certainly not to die here. Out there lies the heart of the city and the freeways, tangled in a web of traffic, snarled in gridlock, unable to move. It's quite fitting that we begin here in Hollywood. oligarchy that controls this country knew long ago that they'd have to gain control over the media, the motion picture industry, if they were going to change America and take over the world. From their studios, they can take you up there to the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for... No, I guess you want to do it again. Okay.
Or back in time to the age of the dinosaurs. Across the street is Ripley's Believe It or Not. Here in Hollywood, they can get you to believe that things that are totally false are absolutely true. They control what goes into motion pictures. And there's nothing that you see in a motion picture that isn't planned. The Christian cross on the bad guy or raping the girl. The American flag in the lapel. It's a land of illusion. They're selling Santa Claus. And you're to believe it. We're walking down the street of no return along the boulevard of broken dreams. Hollywood is the, it is the cancer on the hemorrhoid of the ass of the whore of America.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I can't imagine that the Malthusian-minded men who operate from the Council on Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, are going to spare these people. I simply can't imagine it. They want to kill you. They want to control you. They want to use you. They want to abuse you. Kill, control, or incarcerate. That's the program. That's what they want. And they're going to get their way if you give in. 911? That's just the beginning. These people are history. They're going to go. I mean, that's the program. 8 out of 10. They want to reduce the population of the world by 80%. That means 4 out of 5 of these good people here would be eliminated. Can they do it? They can with your help. All you have to do is nothing. Simply nothing. And they'll do it. Christians, Muslims, Jews, all across America, that's the program. I mean, you've got to understand what this is all about. It's the land of make-believe. It's illusion and confusion. It's control. The managed media is owned by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, ABC, NBC, and CBS. It's becoming a police state. Patriot Act 2, it's right on the brink, and we're right on the edge of having police control every aspect of your life. Your television, what you see, what you eat, where you go, what you do. And here they come, America. It's already started in Britain. On every corner there's a camera.
CCTV cameras everywhere. They're on the London Underground, they're on buses, they're on every street. There are cameras to make sure that you don't cross a red light. There are cameras to make sure you don't go in bus lanes. Cameras everywhere. Every shop, every shopping centre. But people don't notice it anymore. I mean, George Orwell's prophecy of 1984 has come true.
They want you to have a national ID, a mark in the back of your hand, a biochip. Chaos is soon to come. The type of chaos we experienced with the World Trade Center, the type of murder, the type of massacre. There are 3 groups of people who understand with absolute certainty that the attack was done internally, not simply against the buildings, but against the Constitution and the people of the United States. First of all, there's the billionaire banksters and their agent provocateurs who did it. Secondly, there's the Arabs who they blamed for having done the dastardly deed. They're certain that they didn't do it. And of course, there's individuals like myself who know the MO, the method of madness.
I listened and watched TV for 3 months and decided I wanted questions answered. And I thought to myself, our country is supposed to be the best, the strongest, has the most sophisticated air defense. What happened? My husband was in the Air Force 4 years and protected our soil, and he died on our soil. I want to know. They turned around and took my wrongful death lawsuit, turned it into a negligence, and put it with the rest of them. I want answers. So I don't feel I'm going to get a true answer because TSA, Transportation of Safety Aviation, Department of Justice, all of them came in and blocked all evidence. That doesn't go because I grew up old-fashioned, tell the truth, no matter if it hurts, no matter who's guilty. One murder, 3,000 murders, we have a right to know what happened. To this day, we don't know it.
Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11.
Yeah. There's time for politics. And, you know, it's time for politics. And it's an absurd insinuation.
All the evidence leads not in a very nice area. They won't give us any answers. A lot of the families that you're not hearing from are medicated. They tried to trick me, and I wouldn't buy that. I want to be a clear mind, clear thinking. I want to be able to ask questions and get answers. And I'm not getting any answers.
2 years after 9/11, the Republican chairman of the commission investigating the attacks is now saying they could have and should have been prevented. Tom Kane, appointed by President Bush, has told CBS News, quote, "I do not believe it had to happen."
Krista Breitweiser is a 9/11 widow who fought for the creation of the Independent Commission on the 9/11 attacks. Thanks for coming back. The same topic as always. Could this have been prevented? What do you know now, thanks to what Tom Kane had to say?
Well, I mean, I think it doesn't come as a surprise that he stated that 9/11 could have been prevented. I think what is a surprise is that he did, in fact, come out and acknowledge that people should be held accountable. And I think that in order for us to make sure as a country that 9/11 will never happen again, we need to make sure that the individuals who are responsible for the failures are held accountable.
The president has agreed to meet with the 9/11 Commission, a private meeting that the White House is just now preparing to make public. I don't think they have done that yet. The president will meet with the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, of course, investigating the deadly attacks on New York and Washington. They had indicated that they wanted testimony, or at least a meeting with both the president and the vice president. It's not clear yet whether this meeting will be under oath. The White House says they are still working out those details, but as one official said tonight, regardless, the president plans to tell the truth, and this would take the place of any public testimony.
Well, what's amazing is when you stop and consider that everyone that they say was involved in the attack, the Al-Qaeda network, Osama bin Laden, these are creations of our intelligence agencies. In my book, I detail how that Osama bin Laden actually came to the United States back in the 80s and was given arms and ammunition, some training. The Al-Qaeda people, they're called a terrorist network. I think they would be more correctly termed a mercenary, Arab mercenaries. And of course, if you have mercenaries, then they were created initially to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. And but once you have a bunch of mercenaries, then they go and fight whoever you order them to go fight. And I think the idea is that now they're all gone rogue and that they're just doing whatever they want to do. But since they were created and working for the CIA, I think the question has to be asked, could they still be working for the CIA? Could they still be working for the CIA? Could they still be working for the CIA?
I'm very, very concerned that a small group of people who have a different agenda, they believe in power in the hands of a ruling elite, have seized control of the government of the United States. And they intend to use our financial and military power to bring about an empire which will be under their control, creating a ruling elite and, of course, the enslavement of all mankind. I fear for our country when I reflect that we have wicked and evil people in control of our government today, surrounding the president. I don't know what the president knows, but I know that these people, and I'm speaking now of the members of the Project for the New American Century, have an agenda which is totally contrary to that of our founding fathers and that of the majority of the American people.
I see that you've got this dollar with Osama bin Bush on there.
Yes.
But he's shaved. I don't see his beard.
Yeah, you know, actually, originally I wanted to have just a little mustache, sort of like Hitler, because that's what he reminds me of at this moment in time. I think what we've witnessed is the American Reichstag and the rise of the Fourth Reich here.
I see, for example, the idea of the bigger the lie, you know, that we heard earlier today in the Conspiracy Convention, that the massive, colossal lies that Bush and his cohorts are promulgating on the American people, or perpetrating on the American people and the world, is so monstrous that it's very much similar to Hitler. And you know, the Reichstag, when he burned the Reichstag, and said, now this is, we are going to have a long war ahead of us. Very much the same with the Twin Towers. And what George Bush said to the American people.
We're concerned about the rise of the Fourth Reich of the rich, the Cassius cartel, because it really isn't communism that's the problem, and it's not capitalism. It's corporate socialism. It's called
fascism.
The Cassius. Well, it's corporate fascism.
Transnational fascism, I think.
Absolutely. Well, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
Now, you have 500,000 of these bills printed?
Yeah, we made 500,000. We've incorporated a lot of the secret societies into the bills, and people love them. They just, you know, pass them out like candy. It's so much fun to give money.
I love it, and of course, you can get it. You can write to the website, freeworldalliance.com.
The lady that did this deserves congratulations. I don't know if she's a rightist or a leftist or what.
There's no question that the American Illuminati will attempt to use mandatory vaccinations on every man, woman, and child in this country. In fact, they already purchased 300 million doses of smallpox vaccine to be used. They used to have larger lots of vaccines. Now they're in single doses where they could actually embed a chip in you via these single-dose vaccines. State-mandated laws are forcing our children to have vaccines just to participate in any school program. And right now, through CAPTA, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, that's in all the states, they are threatening to take away custody of people's children if they do not get these vaccines.
Will they poison our reservoirs? Will their agent provocateurs spread anthrax or some other deadly disease? And then ask us to take vaccinations, which will kill rather than cure us. Taking a look at this city, I think it would be very satanically significant if they sacrificed the city of angels to their Lord Lucifer by dropping a nuke or a biobomb.
I can't imagine what form it might take, perhaps chemical, biological. There could be a detonation of a Hiroshima-type bomb. Yes, I see the possibility of an incident being orchestrated so that the people, the populace will be so frightened that they will be willing to transfer power from the people who are the government to the president, who would become more or less a dictator. And this is, I mean, traditionally and historically, this has happened in many societies. People will often sacrifice individual freedom in order for the feeling of being secure, the false sense of being secure.
The World Trade Center in Oklahoma City Gun should bring about legislation that would transfer power from the people to the president and the police.
This is usually always the case for people who have a difficult time accepting the notion that their own elected government officials are responsible for creating things like the Oklahoma City bomb or 9/11. If you can't accept that proposition, then you certainly have to concede the idea that once these things happen, then the state power exploits them and uses it to consolidate it and expand its own power. That's the whole point of the Patriot Act. It's the whole point is every time after one of these things happens, there's a clamp down by authorities, there's a pulling back of the civil rights and the liberties of Americans.
The Bush administration is not an administration for this country. It is not for this country. It's all a secret administration. When it tells our Congress that they have to approve something he wants put through, but they're not allowed to read it, like with the Patriot Act, there's something rotten in Denmark. And it's right here in our nation. And anybody that can buy the fact that when a golfer is gone for 15 minutes, that our fleet can be right out there flying alongside of them. But they got 4 planes that they can't find, and my goodness, they can't send any planes out for them. I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Certainly we know that the plan for the Office of Homeland Security was drawn up at least a year before the terrorist attack, and that would be in the report, the Phase 3 report of the National Commission on Security in the 21st Century. That report was released at least a year before the September 11th attack. And of course, of that commission, that United States Commission, 13 of the 14 members came to the Council on Foreign Relations. We know that the plans were made for the Model State Emergency Health Powers Act at least a year before the attack. And lastly, of course, the legislation, the USA Patriot Act, which was enacted simply 46 days after the terrorist attack. Actually, that introduced much of the legislation that Bill Clinton could not get enacted after the attack on the Murrah building back in 1995.
This is Primakov, who's an advisor to America's Homeland Security for the George Bush, and he was also a deputy minister for the KGB, and that's really what our country is coming to. We also have Viet Kim, who is the author of the Patriot Act. He is the one that assembled it, and he assembled it mostly before the 9/11 event, because it was 9 days later, on the 20th of September, that Bush ordered the Homeland Security into place. Viet Kim is also a part of the Transition Committee for Arnold Schwarzenegger for the state of California. The state of California, if it was an independent country, would be the 7th largest country in the world. Also in that transition committee are a lot of culprits with ties to George Bush, but one of the most blatant is Willie Brown, who advocated during a radio broadcast and is reproduced in an AP article that he thinks that all towns and cities should be abolished and that the state of California should be run from the capital. I'll read a quote to you about U.S. Attorney General Viet Kim, who wrote Bush's Patriot Act that has taken away the Fourth Amendment and quite a few others. And then I'll give you a quote from Adolf Hitler. Quote, "The government will make use of these powers insofar as they are essential for carrying out the vital necessary measures. The separate existence of federal states will not be done away with. The number of cases in which the internal necessity exists for having recourse to such a law is in itself a limited one." That's Viet Kim. Let's hear from Adolf Hitler here. "The administration will not abuse these far-reaching powers. I think security exists for liberty to flourish, and liberty cannot exist without order and security." Now what I did is I woofed you, because really what one said, what I said Adolf Hitler said, is what Viet Kim said. What Viet Kim said is what Adolf Hitler said. And there's very little difference in intent and in meaning. And that's the problem we're meeting with today. My trick on you isn't near like the 9/11 trick that they've pulled on all the rest of us, which is vital to not only our freedoms, but our lives.
It's time for American citizens to stand up and pay attention to what we're here for and what this country was founded upon and where it could be going if we, each one of us, does not stand up and write our congressmen, our senators, and let them know we are very concerned with what the Patriot Act means. What is it taking away from us concerning homeland security? What are we losing in the Patriot Act? What are we losing in terms of freedom? What are we losing in terms of our spirituality? Taking God out of everything in the country. You know what happens when that happens, I'll tell you. You lose.
Make no mistake about it. I think there was a lot of well-intended people that voted for that Patriot Act. And I think that they really felt that they were doing the right thing, and in some cases many of them still do. Quite frankly, I looked at it just the other way. I think our freedoms are more at peril when we're in danger. And when we feel that we're in danger, we're willing to give up more of our freedom for security and protection. And I think that that's when our long-term liberties are most at risk.
The easiest way to gain control of the population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened.
I'm deeply concerned as an American citizen. I know Congressman Dannemeyer has been on the right side a lot of the time. Some of the times I think he's been way out of whack, but I'm about to ask you, do you see the Hitlerization or the Nazization of this nation with the passage of the Homeland Security Act, the Patriot Act, and the Anti-Terrorism Act transferring power from the people to the president and the police as occurred in Nazi Germany?
I hope you're wrong, Anthony. I have a lot of confidence in Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft. I know him personally. He's a fine Christian gentleman, a person of integrity, a lawyer of ability, and dedicated to doing what's right for America. If what you describe comes about, he'd be a part of it, and I can't believe he'd do that. I hope, as I say, you're wrong.
Listen, I hope that I'm wrong, Bill. But I believe
I can tell you,
I believe that I'm
this,
right.
I share my experience in public life has taught me this: the greatest threat to freedom, and our founding fathers understood this, is government.
George Bush has talked about a new world order. Adolf Hitler's book was called the World Order, the New World Order, the one after Mein Kampf. We know that the Bush family has financed it. Do you not, in some way, see the Nazization of this nation actually coming about?
No, I don't. And maybe I'm more naive than you think I am. But I say again, what I see is I see a nation that for the first time, at least in this generation, has experienced an attack on itself and it doesn't quite know how to handle it.
In Nazi Germany, the Judgment at Nuremberg movie, which in my opinion is one of the greatest movies ever made because it described what happened to the Attorney General of Nazi Germany. He just lost his integrity to the Nazi Party.
I believe that's what's happened with Ashcroft. He has lost his integrity to the New World Order, because take a look at those boys surrounding him. Every single individual, almost without exception, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Founders and many of the main people that are on the center of the Council on Foreign Relations are members of the Skull and Bones. So in the last 100 years, an organization which hardly anybody knew anything about when Sutton got his first box of papers, scored 3 presidents, Howard Taft and the 2 Bushes. Then we find out that the people that were in charge of the wars for the last 100 years, Henry Stimson, was he was Secretary of War for World War I and World War II. We find that the co-founder of the Skull and Bones, Alphonso Taft, was Secretary of War in the late 1800s. We find that, of course, George Bush, who was head of the CIA, was also a member of the Skull and Bones. Winston Lord was president of the Council on Foreign Relations for some years when Rockefeller wasn't, and he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
These guys from the Skull and Bones have got this election covered like white on rice. Both Scary Carey and George Walker Bush were initiated while laying nude in the coffin at the Skull and Bones. It's heads they win. It's tails you lose. You don't have a chance unless we incite a revelation. Alexandria Robbins, in her book, Secrets of the Tomb, puts it this way.
Alexandria Robbins says the cast of the initiation ritual is right out of Harry Potter meets Dracula.
There is a devil, a Don Quixote, and a pope.
The fact is that we have not been told the truth. The fact is lies have been told about September 11th. The fact is my client, Ellen Mariani, wants the truth. The fact is that this story will not be released, will not be covered by the mass media. And part of that is the Council of Foreign Relations, we have sued as a defendant in this case because we believe that they're involved also. And that could explain why the media won't cover this, because on the Council of Foreign Relations are the heads of the major newspapers and radio and TV stations in this country.
The comparisons between George W. Bush and Adolf Hitler have been made. You've seen them, I've seen them, and they're certainly there. But George W. Bush today has what Adolf Hitler only dreamed of having. George W. Bush has the populace behind him. He has the media control. He has so much more media control, so much more media savage than Adolf Hitler ever dreamed of. Plus, you've also got the surveillance techniques. You've got the DNA for the eugenics. It's all in place today for the Nazization of America.
Yes, we are witnessing the Nazification of America, and we have been for many, many years. In one way of looking at it, we lost World War II. We took over the Nazi intelligence network of Reinhard Gehlen, and the Nazi scientists, the slave masters of Nordhausen, became the architects of our own space program. And we continue to see that all of the time. And these patterns of terrorist events are mere reflections of the Reichstag fire. And this whole kind of manipulation of power is very much patterned after the fascism and Nazism that we supposedly fought against in World War II.
My book, Painful Questions, provides evidence that both World Trade Center towers and Building 7 were demolished with explosives that were placed in the building before the attack. These three buildings were imploded. They were not brought down by fire or airplanes.
Eric, I'm taking a look at a picture of the explosion at the World Trade Center here, and I see debris coming out from the building, shot out from the building, as if there was a massive explosion internally. Is this, in fact, what happened?
Well, this is what these photographs are showing. Dust is flying out of the building horizontally in an area of the building that is still structurally sound. It is only after this dust and debris fly out that that portion of the building starts to collapse. It's not the other way around, in which the building collapses and then dust comes out during the collapse. This dust is coming out first. Here's one photograph that shows pieces of the building being thrown out horizontally hundreds of feet away from the building. These buildings are not simply falling down. They're blowing outward horizontally, as if high pressure is inside these buildings, such as from explosives.
Well, Eric, we saw in some of the videos a burst coming from one floor and then the next and the next and the next and the next, and it was blowing materials of steel and metal out from the building as if it was systematically set up as one would destroy a building like the Sands Hotel. It would indicate that it is not only imploded, but that all three buildings, Building 7, the North and South Towers, were imploded. Am I wrong, or is this not the evidence?
No, you're correct. And in fact, let me show you one of the pictures that shows that. This photograph is an example of what I'm talking about. It shows a line of dust flying out of the building horizontally, and it goes out in perfect symmetry, one floor at a time. And notice that this portion of the building is structurally intact.
We're told that the debris was picked up and shipped overseas to communist China, where you would never ever see it or never be able to use the evidence in a trial against administrators of this government. Is that true?
I heard the same thing, that it was sold as scrap metal at a very low price to foreign nations. Now this is a violation of the law. Remember when the space shuttle collapsed and fell down all over the states of Texas and others? You were fined and arrested if you even touched that debris. It's against the law to pick up that debris from the World Trade Center. That was evidence in what happened. And our government sold it and to foreign nations.
What happened to the crime scene? They took it away. They shipped it to New Jersey. And then the steel, because if you investigate steel, you can see if there's anything, other components, or what caused the meltdown. The steel has been shipped over to China. It's gone.
The FBI furnished the explosives in the 1993 World Trade Center attack, so how can we ignore them in this 2001 attack?
Now you'll see the evidence of the federal government targeting the World Trade Center twice. October 28th, 93, and October 31st, 1993, New York Times, as well as the December 15th Chicago Tribune. The federal government was actually caught on tape by their informants, ordering them to let the bombing go forward, to cook the bomb, to give the terrorists the detonators, to create yet another crisis, this time to usher in a police state and a war upon the American people. Unlike the Northwoods plan, the FBI actually carried out the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. They actually hired a retired 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, Ahmad Salam, and paid him $1 million and gave him real explosives, a detonator, and told him to build a bomb and to give it to the foolish people that he was controlling to allow them to attack the World Trade Center complex. There was only one problem with their plan. Mr. Salam was not as ruthless and sociopathic as the FBI and their globalist controllers. He began to get very concerned right before and, of course, after the attack, saying, "Why are you giving me real explosives if this is just a sting operation?" When they told him to go ahead and let the attack go forward, he secretly recorded the head of the FBI in New York ordering him to let the bombing take place. It's very important to understand that all the evidence you just saw is documented, 110%. It is part of the public record. The FBI admits it, but the media wrote a few stories about it. There were a couple of nightly newscasts. It was never heard of again. But unlike Pearl Harbor, where the government allowed the Japanese to attack as a pretext for war, the federal government financed and controlled this attack on the World Trade Center to create a system of anti-terrorism, to sic a homeland security system on the American people. There was only one problem. The drivers of the truck didn't park it up against the main support column as they had been ordered to do by Mr. Salam and the FBI. No, my friends, they parked it about a dozen feet away, and so it didn't bring down the building. And in consequence, they didn't get the massive death toll they needed to create the martial law system they were hell-bent on implementing against our constitutional republic and the American people. To the American people's horror, the feds finished the job on September 11th, 2001.
Has the military been planning an Operation Northwoods similar to what happened in 1962, presented to JFK, and is this the result of what they've been planning all along?
9/11 wasn't the first attack on the United States by agents of the United States.
General Lyman Lemnitzer had a plan to create terrorism in this country, to be done by U.S. forces, maybe the CIA, maybe some special army forces.
The Northwoods plan, a plan concocted by the Pentagon in the 60s, designed to, well, blow up buildings using airplanes,
kill American citizens and blame it on a foreign government, Castro in that particular situation.
General Lemnitzer and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were given the task of coming up with some manner, some way that they could get justification that the United States was trying to defend itself against the Cuban government, and that the Cuban government was performing acts of terrorism or sabotage or invading the Guantanamo base or sinking U.S. ships or shooting down U.S. planes.
The press would conclude that this sabotage was done by Fidel Castro, and it would have justified an invasion of Cuba.
9/11 was exactly that kind of plan.
They were going to have hijackings of United States planes by friendly Cubans and make it look as though it were Fidel and the boys who were pulling these hijacks off.
Operation Northwoods was a plan designed to use American tax dollars to kill American citizens in order to blame the event on a foreign government, in order to justify us going to war.
Let's go to Vietnam, for example. Everyone knows now today that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a figment of Lyndon B. Johnson's imagination, only for the purpose of getting us deeper and deeper into Vietnam.
The most ambitious plan that they had was to charter an airplane, which was going to be a CIA proprietary charter plane, have a phony passenger list, have the passengers mount onto a second plane. That second plane would land, and then the first plane would be remotely controlled, fly over Cuban airspace, and it would have a bomb set inside of it set to go off remotely, and it would put out a mayday call when it was over Cuba, and then the plane would be exploded, and people would hear the mayday on the mainland in the United States and report that a charter plane had been shot down over Cuba, and then the idea was to blame it on the Cubans.
The plan was scrapped by Kennedy, but it didn't go away. 9/11 was exactly that kind of plan, designed to bring to effect a law already sitting there, already written, called the Patriot Act in the Department of Homeland Security. This Nazi-style homeland defense has wrapped up FEMA, has wrapped up the Coast Guard and the Border Patrol and the Immigration Service into a very SS type of organization. Throw in total information awareness, throw in the matrix system of linked databases, and it becomes obvious that the 9/11 was the pretext for a crackdown on the American people, not terrorists. They're using Homeland Security and blaming it directly on 9/11, almost a carbon copy of the Operation Northwoods scenario envisioned by the Pentagon, in order to accomplish the same ends. We went to war against a foreign country. We went to war against a country that wasn't a danger to us, that didn't have weapons of mass destruction.
When I was a boy, Alcatraz, or the Rock as they call it, used to house the criminals to keep them from violating the rights of society. Now, society is controlled by a group of criminals from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. How has things changed? A complete reversal from the Constitution, from the Declaration of Independence, to the Declaration of Interdependence, from the United States to the United Nations. Once we had sovereignty, now we have insanity. When I think of the criminals that were once housed in Alcatraz, it almost makes you laugh. There are more criminals in 1 square mile of Washington, D.C. than were ever housed on the Rock.
So it's the New World Order all over again.
9/11 atrocity.
This is what they're planning. The Illuminati 9/11 is coming about. We'll be back.
And by having the legitimate left and legitimate right working together, we outflank the sons of bitches, which take the center ground.
You talk about that in your book.
This event was Erskine's orchestrated
guest,
by agents of
a
this
pilot
government.
named Will Thomas, exposed the outright lies the White House spin doctors and the FBI tried to sell us after the attack. Just days from the show, I was taking a ferry to Vancouver Island in British Columbia, working my way north to meet with this man to find out what he knew that I didn't. The FBI claimed they found Mohammed Atta's Saudi Arabian passport amongst 100,000 tons of smoking rubble, twisted steel, burnt bodies and debris under the collapsed Twin Towers. And from that, the very next day were able to give us both the names and the pictures of 19 skyjackers they claim commandeered the Boeing jetliners. To buy this story, you'd have to believe that Atta's paper passport survived traveling through 6-inch steel beams of one of the strongest, tallest structures ever built, then passed through the interior walls, doors, files, desks, toilets, plumbing, and elevator shafts while engulfed in a ball of flame that the FBI said melted steel, and then fell to the ground 70 stories, where they picked it up, intact. I mean, they'd have to have you believe that Muhammad's passport is made out of kryptonite and came from a planet far, far away. I have a man with me today, Will Thomas. His book, All Fall Down. The 9/11 event. Of course, it was rigged. I mean, you know that, don't you? You don't? We're going to talk about FB lie number 1. These 19 guys, who are they? I mean, how could they, within 48 hours come up with pictures of all of these 19 so-called terrorists?
Well, at least 7 of the named kamikaze pilots were very upset to see their names and photographs splashed in the world's press, since they're very much alive and working with legitimate businesses in Arabia, such as airlines and oil companies. We know that an 8th named hijacker died a year before the incident on September 11th. So right off the top of this story, we have major questions around the identities of the people actually involved. These gentlemen, so named, could not fly a Cessna. That's the FB lie number 2.
If they couldn't fly a Cessna, how in the hell can they fly a 757 and a 767?
What kind of plane is this?
This is a 737-300.
737?
300.
300.
300 is the non-glass cockpit. 700s that we have, they're all glass.
Uh-huh.
The way you can tell the difference is the canoe things that are on the wing.
Yeah.
They're painted orange. That's how you can tell the difference. Or you can look up here and you can see the little TV screens.
How difficult would it be to fly one of these things?
They're actually not too hard to fly. They're easy to fly. They're hard to land.
Hard to land.
Yep. They're the hardest plane I've ever. To land consistently smooth. That is.
How about navigating? You have to do that at the same time?
Sure do.
That's difficult?
No, navigation is easy. These guys, they got GPS and they got an INS. GPS, global positioning system, and the INS, inertial navigation system. So it's you get them within a point or within 100 feet.
Mm-hmm. I've flown the Microsoft 757 simulator, and they're very easy to fly in a straight level, but the minute you start to bank the airplanes and adjust your speed up or down, you can get to the edge of that flight envelope very quickly. The named pilots on these attacks of September 11th, in fact, repeatedly flunked out of flight schools across the United States, to the point where one flight instructor was quoted in the papers as saying they couldn't even drive a car. Their lack of English language skills.
Here's the guys, they can't even drive a damn car. I mean, they're used to driving a camel. And, you know, they're practicing, I see the over and over, the reruns of these guys training on a jungle gym. It's something that's taken off a playground in Los Angeles. They can't drive a car.
We discovered a story from September 15th's Washington Post stating Muhammad Atta had been to International Officers School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, and that others of the terrorists had attended the Aerospace Medical School at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas and the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. 3 of the terrorists had even listed their address on their driver's license as the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida, the story went on, where they participated in military exchange programs for foreign officers at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. Foreign nationals who became terrorist pilots were training at U.S. military facilities. They would most likely have had connections to Arab governments considered friendly to the United States.
They say on the American airline list, they only had 56 people. And no Arabs, not one single one.
It seems incredible to me that young Arab males, some of them flying on one-way tickets paid for with cash, others with no luggage at all, would be allowed on these airplanes without even minimal scrutiny, since warnings had been passed to the White House and to the FAA months in advance of these attacks. Repeated warnings from BND, German intelligence, from French intelligence, from Putin, the president of Russia, telling his intelligence operatives to inform Washington repeatedly that 25 hijackers flying aircraft would attack symbols of American wealth and power. We had students in Brooklyn warning their schoolmates not to go downtown Manhattan on September 11th. Those warnings weren't passed. But when the mayor of San Francisco flew into New York City on September 11th, he was warned the night before by an agent of security for the airport to, quote, be very careful traveling on the 11th. Why wasn't the American public afforded the same warning?
Well, wait a minute. Now, we're talking about Willie getting a warning. Willie Brown, he gets a warning. I mean, he lives, everybody else dies. The president knew about this. This story is so outrageous in the fact that they said that these 19 so-called terrorists blew up this building, and the FBI or FBI didn't know a damn thing about it. The CIA, the ISA, the NSA, the FAA, the U.S. military, naval intelligence, I mean, the Secret Service. And Bush said, hey, he was just reading a nursery rhyme about a goat. Maybe it was a goat of Baphomet to the school children at the Booker School in Sarasota, Florida.
She played with her goat. Go on. But the goat did something made the girl say. But get ready. But the goat did something that made the girl say. Go on. But the goat did something that made the girl say. Go on. But the goat did something that made the girl stand. Go on.
The president was sitting down reading to the school children, and when he was told by Andy Card, his assistant, that the second tower had been hit, you know what he continued reading without a change of expression. He continued reading to the school children. This is after he knew about the second hit on the South Tower. But what is amazing, he said, well, when asked, and he's been asked by 2 newsmen at different occasions, he says, well, when did you first know about this? He says, well, I was, you know, watching it on television.
And I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there. I didn't have much time to think about it. And I was sitting in the classroom, and Andy Card, my chief of staff, was sitting over here, walked in and said, a second plane has hit the tower. America's under attack.
Bush said he was watching it on television. Well, I was thinking about that. And when the North Tower was hit, it wasn't on television. I mean, at least it wasn't on ABC. And it wasn't on NBC. And it wasn't on CBS, and it wasn't on CNN. It had to be in closed circuit. CIA.
Well, the documentary footage showing the first aircraft hitting the North Tower was not on any United States television network for at least an hour after the President-select said he saw it at that school. Even more incredible to me is that Andy Card, whom you mentioned, informed the President, as I document in my book, of the first crash before he left the hotel for the school. You would think that if the United States was under any kind of attack or threat, the President would be hustled away to some secure location and not calmly get in a car and driven to the school.
Well, I mean, it's instantaneous. But it wasn't on ABC, it wasn't on NBC, it wasn't on CBS, it wasn't on CNN. It was on CIA. I've got to believe the President in this one. He says, not only once, he says twice.
Yes, he does.
Twice, that he was watching it on television.
I know you said there'll be a time for politics, but you've also said you wanted to change the tone of Washington. Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Look, there's time for politics. And, it's time for politics. And, it's an absurd insinuation.
You guys on the left are going so far over the cliff. You're making comparisons to the President Adolf Hitler. Even Howard Dean is coming up with conspiracy theories that the President knew about 9/11.
Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11.
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, it's time for politics. And, it's an absurd insinuation.
Senator Prescott, Skull and Bones Bush, taught his grandson to, quote, claim everything, explain nothing, and deny everything. The FBI knew about this. The CIA knew about this. This was a major setup. It was rigged, like the Reichstag was rigged. Hitler said, well, the commies did this. They burnt down the Reichstag, our parliament.
Goring was scuttling around in front of the Reichstag as it was burning. The chancellor at the time, von Papen, arrived in his limo, found Goring shouting, the communists did this, the communists did this. And you can easily see the parallel where with 9/11, up until it happened, the FBI, the CIA, the whole military intelligence community, the diplomatic community, knew nothing about it. And within 120 minutes of it happening, they knew that Osama bin Laden has done it.
Diejenigen Maßnahmen treffen, die von nun ab und für immer eine Gleichmäßigkeit der politischen Intentionen in Reich und in den Ländern gewährleisten. Es ist Sache des Reichstags nunmehr seinerseits eine klare Stellung einzunehmen. Am Schicksal des Kommunismus und der sich mit ihm verbrüdenden anderen Organisationen ändert dies nichts.
Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them.
You've got to transfer power from the people to me. The President, the Fuhrer, and the police.
Mr. Bush said himself this was another Pearl Harbor, but not in the way George meant. This was another deception.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago.
An attack facilitated by agents, we call them shadow government people within the U.S. government, to further their own ends and their own agenda. Who benefits and who loses from the attacks of September 11th?
It would be insane for some Arab or a group of Arabs to attack the United States. That would result in the most devastating destruction of the Muslim world you could ever conceive of. Now, Arabs are not stupid people. If we're to believe that, how are we to believe that these guys, 19 of them, got up and took out 4 planes? It's a total contradiction. But these guys are supposed to have taken over these planes with box cutters and a little plastic knife that you'd spread some cream cheese on a bagel that you'd get at Trader Joe. First of all, these guys don't speak very good English, do they?
No, and most of these pilots we're referring to are military veterans.
And then we're taking a look at an instrument panel. My God, look at all those instruments. And if they don't speak English, how are they going to read what's on the panel? You ever think about that? H.L. Mencken once said, "One can never underestimate the intelligence of the American public." Here in Northern Ireland, the people speak out. They stand out. And they touch the hearts of all of the people of the world. So we'll explain it to you.
The 9/11 atrocity had a very specific design, a very specific agenda, almost planned with geometric precision. It was an atrocity, it was an exercise in chaos, but it was to bring about a very preconceived plan, which is to bring in a police state, to deprive people of their sovereign rights, but specifically to enter in the Patriot Act, which is anti-constitutional and which the people of America need to resist.
Inside the United States, where the war began, we must continue to give our Homeland Security and law enforcement personnel every tool they need to defend us. And one of those essential tools is the Patriot Act, which allows federal law enforcement to better share information, to track terrorists, to disrupt their cells, and to seize their assets. For years, we have used similar provisions to catch embezzlers and drug traffickers. If these methods are good for hunting criminals, they are even more important for hunting terrorists. Key provisions of the Patriot Act are set to expire next year. The terrorist threat will not expire on that schedule. Our law enforcement needs this vital legislation to protect our citizens. You need to renew the Patriot Act. You need to renew the Patriot Act. You need to renew the Patriot Act. You need to renew the Patriot Act.
Now we have a situation where the Patriot Act 1 has been passed, and it has of course eviscerated the Constitution, many of the important parts of the Constitution. And it has forced people into fear and into groupthink and into a disgusting war that didn't need to take place. But now the same people have put before us the Patriot Act 2, and that one is gaining more resistance. Senior police chiefs, governors, senators, congressmen, they're not liking what they're seeing. Some people think that the federal government have gone out of its mind. But if Patriot Act 2 is resisted, as it is being resisted, and as it should be resisted, the government are quite willing and able to wheel out yet another Holocaust, another atrocity. And in my mind, I have a theory that that might be the assassination of George Bush himself. by his own clan. That might sound unusual to some, but this is the ritualistic way in which these people work, especially if it will cause the right kind of reaction.
Either with us or against us. You're either evil or you're good.
They tried it on several of your presidents in the past and succeeded. They even tried it on Ronald Reagan. What would be different with George Bush if it could create the right scenario, the right knee-jerk reaction? This is my particular prophecy, that it is one of the potential options that they have before them, is to take out the president in a situation that will cause mass hysteria, bring in FEMA, bring in the military law, bring in martial law.
And Dick Cheney.
Which is part of the plan.
This guy understands essentially what he's doing. He's evil, he's pure evil, he knows he's evil. He's having a good time being evil. The others are more obsessive.
Initiates into the Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale are given a code name when they become part of that Faustian financial fraternity. But first they have to go into the tomb, into the basement, where they lay nude in a coffin, surrounded by 15 members of the Brotherhood of Death, dressed in black robes. And they are asked to talk about their sexual activities. And then they're born again into the satanic order. And then given a name. In the case of George Herbert Walker Bush, it's Magog. Magog is described as the satanic powers that wage war against God and the righteous at the end of the world.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
What is the mentality of an individual who would allow the World Trade Center and all of the people in it to be sacrificed?
Well, we know what it is. It's a different religious view of mankind. These people do not believe that the God of the Bible, the God that created us, and they don't believe that that God should rule this universe. And that's what this new world order is all about. It's a 1,000-year period where Lucifer, Satan, the devil, will rule the world for 1,000 years. That's what they believe.
Are these people not Luciferian?
These people physically, knowingly, willingly worship Lucifer, Satan, the devil. I proved that in my second book, and I proved it in my third book. These people, George Bush included, and I say that knowing what I'm saying, worships Lucifer, Satan, the devil. There's no question about that. He would not be president unless he worshipped Lucifer. He's got to personally, knowingly, willingly acknowledge Lucifer as God, or he wouldn't be president.
So murder is acceptable under a Luciferian?
These people are taught that there is no such thing as murder. In fact, I read in a book written by the Masons where they say oftentimes one man, if not many men, may be sacrificed for the good of the many. And they said sacrificed in the ordinary sense of the word. That is called murder. When you sacrifice someone in the ordinary sense of the word, you push the virgin into the volcano. Push the virgin into the volcano. Push the virgin into the volcano. Push the virgin into the volcano.
If you're a Christian, thinking that by following the footsteps of George Bush, that you're on the highway to heaven, you won't be going to purgatory. You're going straight to hell.
We're going through some things right now in this world that I'm very concerned about, and I'd like to share those with you. I'm very concerned about the spirituality of this country. I'm very concerned with holding on to spirituality in this country.
If you get these guys out of the government, Cheney, Rumsfeld, the notorious Wolfowitz and so forth, this guy, you get them out. Now what do? You have a president who's an idiot. What do you want to do? Want to get rid of Bush to get Cheney? Are you crazy? you want to impeach Red Riding Hood to get Wolf? Nuts. So what you do is you do something that you can do. This fellow is impeachable, Cheney. He's committed impeachable offenses. He's subject to summary impeachment.
Dick Cheney and I came to the House together in '79. It's troubled me that Cheney is a member of the CFR, but I think I've got confidence in the judgment of Dick Cheney that he will do what's right for America, not for what's right for Dick Cheney's career.
Well, maybe he's doing what is right for the New World Order. I mean, that's...
anybody who's a member of the CFR is suspect.
Well,
on my list on that.
Not only is he suspect, but the war drums are beating. Fox News is calling for war. The president is calling for war. Cheney is calling for war. Isn't this what Adolf Hitler did after power was invested in him?
Yes, he did.
By the Reichstag?
He did. 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 He did.
This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order. This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order after Iraq invaded Kuwait.
The Nazis said they were following orders. That was the excuse of the people that were below other people that were below Hitler. But nobody is lifting the arms of this person and squeezing the trigger. If you follow orders and you are taking away from yourself the biggest responsibility you have as a person on this planet, and that is to make your own choices. If you agree that following orders is the only course of action that is morally responsible, then go ahead and you'll face the consequences.
Bush knew Iraq committed no crime against this country, and he ordered the most awesome army on earth to open fire upon innocent men, women, and children in the middle of the night. Bush ordered this massacre, which by early 2004 had killed over 10,000 innocent Iraqis and left over 1,000 military men's bodies blown up, bludgeoned, and buried in blood.
You have all of these reports from the Arab media saying hundreds of women and children have been killed. Marines on the ground saying they're not attacking civilians, but the ground truth is the Pentagon does not keep a civilian casualty count, and we don't really know how many civilians have died. All they can say is that Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya are covering it.
Bush had to sell the American people the big lie, and the American people had to buy it to justify this ruthless attack upon a defenseless, defeated country ruled by a dictator which the CIA and his father had helped stay in power.
Do you think the soldiers on the front line of this war know that the weapons of mass destruction ruse is just that, just a ruse?
Think about it. We are in Nazi Germany, 1939. The invasion of Poland has just taken place. We are on the verge of potentially World War III, the draft, the whole thing.
And Iraq is free.
These guys are practiced liars. It's what they do for a living. It's who they are.
Do you think that's why they keep pushing the weapons of mass destruction issue to set up an imminent attack?
Well, they just took it all back. I mean, with David Kaye's testimony, and in Britain, Lord Hutton, basically absolving Tony Blair of any wrongdoing in the death of Dr. Kelly, and at the same time saying that somehow he never talked about weapons of mass destruction, and the head of the BBC resigning, and it's like, wait a second, we're in some fantasy land.
The allegation in the broadcast that the government probably knew that the 45-minute figure was wrong, even before it decides to put it in, was a very grave allegation which attacked the integrity of the government and the integrity of the Joint Intelligence Committee.
We do not know, we can't know.
If you talk to folks in the administration privately, they concede what seems to be obvious to everybody else, that there was some major gap between the accusations and what actually occurred there.
I don't really think the weapons of mass destruction were the sole reason for the war.
President Bush said on March 17th of last year, 3 days before the war started with Iraq.
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised. Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here. The Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised.
If you were telling me that you wanted me to put on some monkey suit and remove my brain and do exactly what you say and go to some country and kill people I've never met for some bogus reason, let me tell you, I'd be a Marine, or maybe I'd be in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. Doesn't really matter.
Kissinger met with the families of 9/11 victims and assured them he was on the job. Kissinger had been lauded as the ideal choice when President Bush named him.
The American people appreciate this sacrifice. And our government owes you more than gratitude.
In the book, The Final Days by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, there's a quote from Henry Kissinger. Kissinger, the key advisor to both George Opium Poppy Bush and his son, the President of the United States, refers to the military.
Military men are dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns for foreign policy.
These billionaire banksters use the U.S. military like toilet paper to wipe up their excrements before they're flushed away into a satanic system and forever forgotten.
Is this conspiracy being conducted by the evilarchy that operates through the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which operates from the city, within the city in London?
Well, once you really delve into the details and the people and the organizations behind these events, yes, you see the same telltale folks and the same thing.
We're coming up now to Bush House, which is the headquarters of the BBC World Service, where George Orwell wrote his famous novel 1984 in a broom cupboard. Big Brother, BB, is the BBC, the Big Brother Corporation.
Here at Bush House is the headquarters for the New World Order's Big Brotherment communication system. It's called the BBC, the World Service, where George Orwell wrote his book 1984. He knew what it would be like. And when you see the film, when you read the book, the New World Order is your worst nightmare. It's a living hell on earth. Hitler's dream come true, Bush's dream come true. George Orwell described the New World Order, what it would be like. He said, a black hobnail boot, forever stomping in the face of humanity. What is the Bush connection? Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer, one world, one race, one ruler. God forbid that the European Union gives way to a world government. This is Hitler's dream come true. Bush and Blair and the boys from the Brotherhood of Death have something in mind for you. God forbid we have a 1984 in the year 2010.
The fellow who used the pen name George Orwell was actually a member of the Fabian Society, which is a Fabian socialist there in England, and obviously had knowledge of their plans, which we now see coming to fruition.
Joseph Goebbels would tell a lie, and Hitler would tell a lie. The bigger the lie, they're going to believe it.
Investigators say the terrorists may target U.S. nuclear plants, bridges, or dams.
What's going to happen now? Is it going to be a second attack? Is it going to be another icon? Is it going to be the Seattle Space Needle or the Golden Gate Bridge? This is one of the longest unsupported structures in the world. It spans the entrance to San Francisco Bay. Were it to fall, and the president would say, no more, we must have the passage of the Patriot Act too. We must have martial law. We must have a draconian form of government where there would be checks on the road, where there would be monitored conversations, where your website, your telephone, and maybe your bedroom, monitored by agents of the United States government. That's what's to come. That's the program. Hitler burned down the Reichstag. What for? To get transference of power from the people to the president and the police. This structure, were it to go down, might be the necessary ingredient for Bush and the boys from the Brotherhood of Death to ask you in a kinder and gentler way than Uncle Adolf to give up your Constitution. But he'll say, well, it's just for a short period of time. But will it be? Or is it intended to be forever? Next question. FB lie number 4. We know that NORAD is supposed to take down a plane or force it down, drive it down if it's going to go into a city and it's going to endanger the lives of millions of people.
There was an open line established between FAA, NORAD, and other agencies, including CIA and FBI, that morning.
We did not have an open line at that time with the FAA. We did not have an open line at that time with the FAA.
I would encourage all of you that work for larger news organizations than I do as a freelance writer to look into the NORAD issue. We should be able to determine through government records who gave the command to scramble the jets from Langley instead of Andrews, which apparently was a critical mistake, and follow the chain of command upwards from that command to find out who is accountable for the NORAD blunder that morning.
We find that NORAD does what?
They launch alert aircraft that are on the runway, fully armed, 24 hours a day to protect the people of the United States from hijackers and terrorists. That is their mission. We have a squadron at the Otis Air Force Base at Cape Cod and another squadron at Andrews Air Force Base. In fact, 2 squadrons down there, just 10 miles from the White House. They're on duty around the clock.
The Andrews Air Force Base has 2 squadrons, right?
That's right, 1 Marine and 1 Navy.
1 Marine, 1 Navy. And these planes are up for about an hour and a half?
The Pennsylvania flight was over an hour and a half before it was shot down.
NORAD is ordered to stand down, and they can only be ordered to stand down by the Chief Executive of the United States.
These planes, in fact, are routinely launched to check out any commercial flight that strays from its flight plan or is out of radio contact for a very limited amount of time. They're scrambled instantly. But 18 minutes later, 2 F-16s were scrambled. But where did they take off from? Otis Air Force Base on Cape Cod, nearly 180 miles away.
Since 9/11, NORAD has sent fighter jets more than 500 times to check out suspicious planes. The North American Aerospace Defense scrambled 2 F-16 fighter jets from Andrews Air Force Base to intercept the passenger jet. And 2 other fighters took off from Norfolk with orders to fly precautionary air combat patrols over Washington. The fighters were called off when the jet landed without incident in Baltimore.
Project for a New American Century was put together in the year 2000 by the Gang of Four, the Rumsfeld, the Cheneys, Wolfowitz. This plan outlined world domination by overwhelming United States military power. And the PNAC plan called for a catalyzing event, their words, to galvanize the American public behind the notion of world domination. And they said it would take a catalyzing event like another Pearl Harbor.
Somebody's getting the gold and we're getting the shaft. It's like the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor a reserve. The banksters control it. The banksters control this operation. I'm talking about an evilarchy here. The Council on Foreign Relations is America's evilarchy.
Either with us or against us, you're either evil or you're good.
Bush talks about an evil axis. Well, he's part of the evilarchy. His granddaddy, Senator Prescott Bush, was a financier of a fellow named
Adolf Hitler.
It's very well documented that Prescott Bush financed Hitler's rise to power through the Harriman Bank, and further that he was tried for treason and convicted and lost that bank.
Expand a little bit about some information that most people don't know, and that's that Senator Prescott Bush, when he was director of Brown Brothers Harriman, financed Adolf Hitler directly.
This is part of the syndicate operation. But who was the Harrimans? The Harriman interest was actually created from London through Abel Harriman's father, through Jacob Schiff. It was created on behalf, at that time, of the King of England, Edward VII. It was Edward VII who organized World War I. He died before living to enjoy the outcome of this plan. So Harriman was part of the syndicist banking network of the world, inside the United States. Harriman was the key person, like Prescott Bush, for example, who as chief executive officer for Brown Brothers Harriman, signed the paper which authorized the release of funds to bail the Nazi Party out to become then put in by Hindenburg as the governing party of Germany.
Fascism seems to run in the Bush family, and that GW's great-granddaddy, Prescott Bush, financed Hitler's rise to power and the nightmarish Third Reich. Half a century later, we are faced with the emergence, the in-our-face emergence of the Fourth Reich. We have the return of fascism to the United States.
If you liked what Hitler did, you're going to love what Bush is doing.
You know what's happening today, don't you? Sure you do. I know what's happening. You know what's happening. You go to the dictionary, under fascism. What do you see there? Pictures, two of them. One of George W. Bush just smiling at you, and the other of whom? His evil twin, Adolf Hitler. Both of them. You want to find out what fascism's about? Read the definition in the dictionary. Rule of, by, and for corporations. Look at what's going on in America. Look at the Walmarts. Look at the ABC, NBC, CBS, the Walt Disney, the whole thing. Is that what we're under? What's happened to the unions? What's happened to sovereignty of America? We're controlled by multinational corporations and the banksters. Pure and simple.
And they are in the war business. They are trying to bring about world government through world war. That's exactly what Hitler did. In Hitler's second book, the one after Mein Kampf, the world order, the new world order. And Bush Sr., Opium Poppy Bush, I mean, that's just a nickname he picked up in Vietnam when he was head of the CIA, all documented in the book. All fall down. One world, one race, one ruler. The blacks, browns, people that don't agree, I mean, they're to be terminated.
It's real clear that they want to reduce the population. Anyone can find that information from just looking at the minutes of a Bilderberger meeting. What is not so clear is exactly how they're going to deliver that message to us. Reducing the population 80% is quite a feat. Vaccines has got to be a key method for delivering toxins, disease, death, and mayhem. They have taken the oral polio vaccine that was discontinued in the United States and shipped it over to Africa, and those people are dropping like flies from AIDS as well as the oral polio vaccine.
There's an alliance happening between the legitimate right and the legitimate left, because the enemy has taken a position in the center. Now we have an opportunity to outflank the sons of bitches. From the right and from the left, we're talking about the same group of people. What the FBI isn't telling you about, and what the FAA isn't telling you about, and certainly Osama bin Bush isn't telling you about, is the fact that those planes that were flying around the sky could be commandeered from the ground by NORAD.
This craft is a 757, a Boeing. The same type of craft that was flown into the World Trade Center. The technology has existed since the 1970s to override the controls of a Boeing 767, 757. In the distance is New York. It was attacked on September 11th, 2001. The World Trade Centers went down, and the demand for war skyrocketed. Did agents of the United States government, the CIA and the FBI, knowingly, willfully, and with malice aforethought, engage in activities which resulted in the destruction of those two American icons? There wasn't a single solitary Mideastern name on the flight manifest of either American Airlines or United Airlines. The question has to be answered. Why? That is the burning question, Mr. Bush. It needs an answer, and not by Herr Kissinger and company.
Did they commandeer the planes from the ground? I personally believe they did. How could one of those planes, which has limiters governors be overridden to make a direct hit into the building.
The safest way to crash into the Pentagon is to dive into it while aiming for the center of the 5 rings. However, the terrorists decided to fly along the ground and crash into the building near the helicopter landing pad. The problem with hitting this particular area was that his plane was coming from another direction, so he had to make a 270-degree turn in order to hit that side of the Pentagon. It would have been easier for him to hit Donald Rumsfeld's office. The risky, acrobatic maneuvers of this airplane is enough to convince me that no human was in control of it. I doubt that even the best Air Force pilot could fly a 757 a few inches above obstacles, and at 400 miles per hour.
On the face of it, it's impossible. Eyewitnesses on the ground, including professional pilots, said that whoever was at the controls had to have been an expert pilot. But in fact, an airline pilot with 30,000 hours would not have attempted a maneuver like that. Because Hani Hanjour, the man who flunked repeatedly out of flight school, we were told was at the controls, screaming in the back, blood on the cockpit. He dives that airplane 7,400 feet per minute, pulls out at the last minute, but a heavy aircraft like that will continue traveling in a downward direction even with the nose up. In other words, would continue to descend right into the ground. In other words, a very tricky maneuver. In other words, a near impossible maneuver by an expert.
I've been told that people who were looking up there saw a commuter craft, or what they believed to be a commuter craft, which would hold maybe 12 people, 15, 20 at the most, came zapping out of the sky and did this. Could it have been an aircraft, which we call a drone? In Baghdad, it wasn't what building they could hit, it's what window they could hit. And if you take a look at the $20 bill, on one side when it's folded, miraculously it looks like there's the Pentagon with the flames coming out of the center. And you turn around on the other side and you see the Twin Towers. I was fooling around with this thing, showing this to somebody in London.
It's just so, it's incredible. When I saw it, I actually felt tingling down my spine. It was actually quite horrendous because it looks so much like, I mean, you didn't even have to tell me. It just looks so much like the horrible event that happened at the World Trade Center. Even the fact that where the smoke's coming out of, you know, both the towers, it's just in the exact place, and it's blatant. It's blatantly, basically showing you that this was planned.
911 was exactly that kind of plan, designed to bring to effect a law already sitting there, already written, called the Patriot Act in the Department of Homeland Security. A very SS type of organization. 911 is the greatest lie ever sold.
We're supposed to trust these people. We're supposed to... They're controlling our lives.
Fascism, Cashism, the New World Order, it's all the same. They intend to kill you.
What you're seeing with the neocons is you're seeing the universal fascists, and they want to go all the way. Their essential objective is reduce the world population to less than 1 billion. Their essential objective is reduce the world population to less than 1 billion. Reduce the world population to less than 1 billion in a very short period of time.
I was in shock. I mean, I just couldn't believe that you've actually made it into a plane, a shape of a plane as well, which is even more symbolic. And I mean, I know that they are really into their symbols. I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but what else is on there? Is there the Big Ben or the Parliament or some symbolic place in England? You know, it's crazy.
We must incite a revelation, an awakening. If we have a revelation, we can stop or control or avoid a revolution.
What passes for news in America is controlled propaganda. You've got those on the left, those on the right, who must come together. A plane doesn't fly without wings, so we bring those on the left, those on the right together, and then we can become a mighty force.
I think this is the most positive development of American politics during my lifetime. I'm so happy to see it. We have always worked for an alliance on the basis of issues, and leave the name-calling aside. Yes, I do think that this is a wonderful development, and I think that that it's time for a realignment of politics in this country. The issue is no more, as far as we're concerned, it's not right or left. It's the same. Really, it's always been national sovereignty, economy and government, which means no more war, stupid wars that we don't need, and it means to work toward the goal of benefiting American society.
We must pay attention to what's going on inside the government. God bless them, they're our government. The most endangered species are dedicated leaders. We need dedicated leaders. We need each other to stand forth and look deeper, go deeper. If it's an inside job, we the people are the government. We can help fix it. And the way of positive thinking and positive living and being a great messenger of hope and a great role model for what freedom truly is. America can do that if the people get involved. And you must get involved, because if you don't, you're going to lose.
You must inform yourself of the facts about what's happening today, because I don't care how brilliant you are, if you are operating on incomplete or erroneous information, you cannot possibly make a correct decision.
Behind me, there's a ship coming in underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Will it still be standing in 2 years? Or will many of American icons be sacrificed for the New World Order? Hitler burnt the Reichstag. And I believe that Bush and the boys from the Brotherhood of Death had a bloody hand in the taking down of the Twin Towers in New York City. Definitely we hear the winds of war. Definitely we see the terror before our television sets. Definitely an event is ready to occur. Can we stop it? If we have an alliance from the right and from the left, if we outflank them, if we get to those who manipulate the minds of America's masses from the center ground, we can change the world, and we can topple the towers of Babylon before we burn in the literal hell on earth.
It is the leaders of the country who determines the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same for any country. Hitler's Reich Marshal, Hermann Göring.